So far, I hope you got basics about XML, its relationship to HTML, and now let's talk about tags, elements, and attributes in XML. So tags carry the smallest unit of meaning, signifying structure, format, or style of the data. They are always enclosed within angled brackets like this, and they are case sensitive. So they are case sensitive means like this with a small basket, with a small basket, B with capital, and all capital. They all carry different meanings, right? So when you define your tags, you have to make sure that you follow the same case. Like if it is in uppercase, you have to use uppercase in your document, and if you have defined your tags in small case, then you have to use a small case in your document, right? So in addition, all tags must be paired so that they have a start and end like this. So this is the opening, as I have said. So you have a tag inside here, then you have to close the tag like this. So this forward slash is used to close a tag, and all these tags should come in pair. All the tags that are opened should be closed, right? And tags are combined with data from tags are combined with data. So we have a content here. Together we call them elements, right? So let's talk about elements. So elements are the building blocks of a document, and an element consists of a start tag, an end tag, and a content in the middle, right? So this is our opening tag, that's a basket, and this is our closing tag, and this is a content. So all together this is called an element, right? So it may seem odd that a single element contains all the data in the HTML document, but we can use nested elements, okay? However, within this single element there might be multiple levels of nested sub-elements which keep in individual pieces of data in a logical and easy to manage structure. So just like for example, let's get back to this part where you see this is basket and it is closed here. Within this we have other elements, right? So these are nested elements, but all together they are under baskets, which has a content like fruit of basket, right? So we can nest our elements, and in this example we have identified a tag called basket. I should come here. So as a document element, because it is the highest level of the hierarchy and it's not the child of any element. So we have a highest element or highest hierarchy here, and we have nested ones, this one, right? So in the structure of a document there can only be one document element, okay? And the other things we have is attributes. So attributes are characteristics of the elements, right? So you can define, or you can tell what color that content should be, or it should be bold, it should be red. So the characteristic to modify our content is used, it's identified as attributes, right? So to any element you may want to add attributes or characteristics. So this gives information about the elements. So attributes are embedded in the element start tag, right? So for example, this is your starting tag, then you can define attributes here, and you have a content here, then you can close your tag like this. So within the start tag you can define the attribute that will tell information about the content, right? So an attribute consists of an attribute name and an attribute value. We will look at this attributes in example. So the attribute name precedes its value and then separated by an equal sign, right? So also the attribute value is enclosed in quotes to delimit multiple attributes in the same element. We could have 3, 4, or 5 attributes that define or that tell information about the content, right? So we have to identify, we have to separate the different attributes using semicolon, okay? So it's like this. For example, we have HTML basket, fruit basket, then orange count 5. This is what we call attributes, right? So count is equal to 5 under quotation, and count is equal to 3 under quotation, count is equal to 2. So this means we have a novel orange fruit count of 5, right? And we have a Granny Smith's apple count of 3. We have red heaven of 2, right? So this is an attribute that tells the quantity of this different types of fruits. And let's talk about document type definitions. So in order to qualify as an XML document, all documents must be at least well formatted, right? So when we define our own tags, we just don't use anything we like, but we have to introduce these tags first to our browsers, then we use them, right? So in addition to well formatted documents, there are valid XML documents. So this means the documents follow a formal structure. And the main difference between a well formatted XML and a valid XML document is the document type definition, right? DTD. So the document type definition is a set of rules that define the elements that may be used and where they may be applied in relation to each other. So the document type definition is where we declare our specific element tags and attributes, right? So we have to introduce our tags like this before we use them. So this is our document type definition. Then after this, we can use this tags like orange, apples, peaches, and grapes, right? So the document type definition could be either external or internal. So external, in a sense, we can define our element tags, then we can use a separate file to store it, then we can call this document type definition into our XML code, right? So you can just, this one, for example, is a document type definition. We create this, then we save this as a DTD extension, right? So if you study HTML, we can define our CSS or the cascading style sheet internally, inline, or external, right? So when we define our CSS or cascading style sheet external, it means that we create our code for style of our HTML document, and we save this as .css file, right? Then we call this .css file in our HTML code so that we can use the attributes defined in this CSS file, right? So just like that, when we define or when we use document type definitions, we can use internal document type definition where we define our tags in the document type definition, and we can use our tags in the same code of XML, right? In the same document of XML. Or we can define our document type definition, we can save it as a different file, which is external DTD, using the extension .dtd, but when we start our XML code, we call this DTD file, then we continue with our XML course, right? So that the elements or the definition for the tags will be extracted or will be referred to the DTD file, which is external to our XML document. Okay, so this type of DTD could be created for use by a particular community, providing a standardized document format for all members, right? So if you have one DTD file and like 5-6 documents, XML documents, we can use, or you can call this DTD file to have a similar standard format of your XML document, right? So DTD reference added to the beginning of XML file tells the XML processor where to find external DTD information, which is information about the creator, the purpose of DTD, and the language used. For example, this one, right? So this is actually an internal, a DTD file which is defined together with the XML documents, right? So here, if you see, there is this extension where we tell where to find the DTD file, which is already stored external to our XML document. Okay, but we can use internal DTD, which is we define our document type definition like this, then we can use our code. Okay, or else we can save this file separate and we can call it using this this extension or this file to find the DTD or document type definition file. Okay, so here is an example. So in this example, here are the pointers to remember reading this file. So this is an internal DTD file. So the DTD and XML code are contained in one document. So this is our XML document, and this is our document type definition, right? So as I've said, you can save this as a separate DTD file .dtd, then you can call using this, okay, where you no longer need to define the document type definition in one code with the XML. Okay, so this is internal, but if I have saved this somewhere like a DTD file, then I don't need to use this one. I'll just use the extension where to find the DTD file. Okay, so the file would have the extension .xml. So this is like, you can save this as basket.xml because we have now the internal DTD file, the internal DTD declaration here. If it was an external DTD, there would be two files, the DTD file with extension of DTD and XML file. So the XML file and the DTD file are separate, okay? But you have to call the DTD file in your XML file, right? So the external DTD would be referenced at the beginning of the XML file. So the DTD says that basket contains oranges, apples, peaches, and grapes. These are identified as the element of the basket, right? So these are the only tags that can appear in the XML document. So which means, for example, in this XML data type definition, we, for example, do not have lemon, right? So which means I cannot use, like, I cannot say lemon count something and x, y, z, x, let's say like this, lemon. I cannot use this tag, right? Because this tag is not defined in our document type definition. So in order to include this fruit, lemon, then you have to define the tag first in your document type definition so that your browser is familiar with this tag, right? So you can only use the tags that you have defined. So there may be information content with a basket, orange, apples, peaches, and grapes. That is a PC hashtag PC data, and basket has information, and the name is a fruit basket, right? So this is the name of the basket. So actually, if you want to test this code, you can just copy this. I will attach the PDF file. So you can copy this, or you can write this on Notepad, then you can save it .xml, right? Then you can execute, and then you can see the code. So before viewing all the styles, then you have, before this will only this will only display this one, but if you want to see how the full XML document looks like, then you should have your CSS or XML style sheet, and then you have to use Internet Explorer 5. Then you have to use Dreamweaver, right? So for now, I'm just trying to introduce how XML looks like. But if you want to go far with XML, or if you are interested to study more about XML, then you can go to the website that I have just mentioned, that is w3schools.com. Then there you can see how you can execute XML course. Okay. So the other topic is about XML style sheets. So what is required for XML documents to be processed? So XML can be applied in many different ways and for many different purposes. So it can be pages viewed in an internet browser. Perhaps it is used for computer-to-computer data exchange, or to provide database updates. So whatever the end result is, it's necessary that XML-aware tools be available to process XML documents, right? So here is a list of some of the components that are necessary for an XML application to process XML documents, right? So as I've said, you need to have document type definition, where you define your own tags. Then you need to have XML aware browser like Internet Explorer 5 or Netscape browser. Then you should have a cascading style sheet or extensible style sheet language. Actually, CSS file is for HTML, right? So we can define the style of our web page or using CSS file, right? So CSS file is a file where you can define the attributes for your page content, right? But you can also use CSS file in XML, right? So there are some disadvantages of using CSS actually, but because for XML we typically use extensible style sheet language, which has some more advantage over CSS file, right? Then the other thing is we need to have XML parsers, and we need to have extensible linking language and namespaces. So all these are required to process XML codes, okay? So XML documents are plain text files. Then you can use a text editor, a notepad or a wordpad to create and view them, but you cannot format using these tools, right? So as I've said, you can use a notepad. You can open a notepad, copy the code, or you can type the code, you can execute, you can view them, right? But the problem is you can not format them using these tools, right? Because we need all this list of components to execute XML documents. So in order to format and view an XML document, you must combine a document with a style sheet, as I've said, right? So the document can be then viewed in appropriate browser. Actually, currently XML can only work on Internet Explorer 5 and Netscape Communicator 5. Okay. Then browser 4.x or lower, like other Internet Explorer, Communicator, or Navigator, cannot directly view formatted XML documents. So, which means you need to have, you need to install Internet Explorer 5 or Netscape Communicator 5 to view, or you can use Dreamweaver to view XML documents with its format. So style sheets contain the rules that declare how the data of an XML document should appear to be interpreted by the user agent. Could be by browser, by printer, or by text-to-speech converter, right? So this is done by assigning a style to our tag, right? So the style is then applied to the data contained within the tag. So the style sheet can be written in several languages. So two of these are cascading style sheet and extensible style sheet language. So as I've said, cascading style sheet is an extension of HTML. So in HTML, just like the document type definition, we can have internal, inline, or external cascading style sheets, right? So when we have inline, it means we can define the style of our content within the tags, right? That is called inline. So let me mention here. So CSS, we have inline CSS, then we have internal CSS, and we have external. So internal means we define how our content is, or our HTML should look like just after the declaration of the HTML document, right? So that is called internal declaration of the CSS, right? So as I've said, inline is when you define the style of your tags, like heading 1, text format, and you can give some format, and let's say XML, then then you close heading 1 like this. So this where we define the style of our content is within the tags, then it is called inline CSS. Then internal is when we define the CSS after the declaration of HTML document. Then it is called external when we have a separate file saved as .css, and just like our DTD in XML, we call this CSS file when we write our HTML code, so that the tag, the content of our HTML should use this style defined by the external CSS file. Okay, so the advantage here is we can use CSS for XML too, but XML has its own styling language called extensible style sheet language, which has more advantage over the cascading style sheet. Okay, so cascading style sheets are used to display an XML file in a consistent format. So as the rule, CSS are kept separate from XML document. Okay, so this is a rule. In XML, we have to use external CSS. By using a browser capable of processing the XML file and the CSS, you will get a formatted document that you can view in the browser window, right? So the browser is able to combine the XML document and format it according to the rules of the CSS, right? So here is an example of an XML file. So it looks like this one. So we have the XML code here, right? But to format or to define the content of our XML, we use the cascading style sheet. So this cascading style sheet contains how the content should look like it should be colored red or blue, or could be underlined or bold or italic, or there are so many styles, right? So this styling could be defined in the style sheet, like CSS style sheet. So the XML will call this style sheet, then which is here. We have XML and CSS aware browser. Then finally we have a formatted document which contains the XML file and the style extracted or which is defined in the CSS style sheet, right? So for example here, this is a cascading style sheet. So there is a style sheet which is defined here. Here is an example of a style sheet. So these are separate actually, okay? So this is the style. So the font size is here, the font family, the width, the color, everything for different tags is defined here, right? Then you can save this as XMS or XM sample doc.css like this, right? So once you save this as an external CSS file, then when you write your XML code, then you can call this XML like this one. Okay, so this is an XML document where you call the CSS file to help you format the content of your XML file, right? For example, this XML contains greetings, hello, okay, question, how are you today, and answer is very well, thank you. Then if you see here, right, for a block for the display, we have this font size is Arial, this font size, font family is Arial, font size is 32, this. Then for question, we have font size X large, color is black, right? So you have here, question is from here, this one, answer will have this style, okay? So for answer, font size is 20 and the color is blue. You see the color is blue. For question, color black, font size X large, okay? And this is for the display. So this is a separate CSS file, as I've said, and this separate CSS file is used or called by XML, by the XML document here, okay? Sorry. So this is the XML, a separate file, and this is the separate file, okay? So if you want to test this, you have to write this and save it as XML document, and you have to write this as a separate file, and you have to save it as a CSS file with this name, okay? So while CSS can format your XML document for display, there are a number of problems with CSS and XML. As I've said, CSS is basically used in HTML, but we can use it also in XML, but it has some problems. So the structure of XML content must be virtually identical to the structure of the presentation, right? The order of the elements in XML document is the way they are displayed. The CSS simply paints the document to the browser, right? Because it is a style sheet. And if you change the document, you have to change the CSS file. So these are some problems with using CSS and XML, okay? So remember that one of the XML's goal is to separate the content from display, right? So this is the objective. This will help for the interoperability of XML, right? So this is not entirely accomplished by using CSS. So what we need is an XML processor that applies sophisticated transformations, allowing extensive rendering of elements, generated text, and calculations without modification to the XML source. So this is what extensible style sheet does, okay? So you can use CSS for XML, but more formal and advantageous than XML is the XSL or extensible style sheet, which basically does everything, which is a problem when we use, which solves the problem related to using CSS file in XML. So XSL or extensible style sheet language is a language for expressing style sheets specifying the use of XML, and it consists of these two parts. That's extensible style sheet language transformer and formatting objects, right? So the extensible style sheet language transformer is a language for transforming this XML documents, and there is an engine that's typically used to convert XML into a strict form of HTML known as XHTML. And the formatting object is an XML vocabulary for specifying formatting semantics. So the formatting objects are not widely implemented as present, because the Internet Explorer 5.0 does not implement them. But keep in mind that in XSL we have these two parts. So as with CSS, XSL style sheet is a template with rules that govern an XML document, right? So the difference is the XSL style sheet is itself an XML document. So when we write CSS file, we just identify the tags and their attributes, okay? But when we write XSL style sheet, we write it as an XML document, okay? So as an XML document, the XSL style sheet contains tags, elements, and attributes by itself, okay? But in CSS, we just have attributes, no elements or tags, okay? So the templates rules of the XSL document has two parts, the patterns and the actions. So the patterns are used to select specific elements in the document, and the actions are used to describe what styling is going to be applied to these elements, okay? So any system that uses XML requires two components. The first one is the XML processor and parser, and the other one is the system application. So this could be the browser or an XML processor or a document translator, or it could be a program that updates the database, right? So the processor checks to make sure that the XML file follows the XML 1.0 specification. So we have so many versions, right? That's why when we declare XML, we say XML version is equal to, in quotation, 1.0, right? Then if you want to tell your browser that this is a different version, then you have to mention the version of the XML, right? Like XML version is equal to 2.0 in quotation, right? So it's the job of the XML parser to read the XML file and create its document tree. So a document tree here is a hierarchical organization of data content, okay? So the application then processes the data in the tree. So most parsers are written in object-oriented programming language like C++ and Java, and these parsers can also be used for checking XML document syntax and structure. So the syntax is a kind of the grammar of writing the XML code, right? So this is done by checking the document's validity against the DTD if available, and if the parser reads the file against the DTD description, is known as validating parser, right? So if you have a data type definition, where you have defined tags, then it has to make sure that this the XML document and the DTD, they go along. Like if there is a case difference, or if you have used any tag that you haven't defined in the DTD file, then that will be checked by the parser, right? So whether the parser checks against the DTD or not, the next step is to break the document into its elements and stores them in the source tree. So if an XML processor is used, this data is then passed to the XSL processor, which applies the formatting rules according to the template rules. So this creates the result tree, right? So this is how it looks like. So instead of CSS, we have XCL style sheet, where we define how the XML document should appear in our browser. Then we have XML data source. So this will be parsed, checked against the DTD file. Then document tree source tree will be here. Then we have XSL processor, where the result tree is created. Then we have XHTML. Then we have other. So this may be a database from which, when this XML is executed, will request for some data from the database to be displayed to the browser, right? And the last thing are the namespaces. So namespaces are collection of names that can be used in XML documents as elements or attribute names, right? So they identify the name as being from a particular domain, standard groups, company, or industry, right? So namespaces are identified by XML by a uniform resource identifier, and this uniform resource identifier contains uniform resource name and uniform resource locator, right? So the uniform resource name is a universally unique number or name that identifies something in a universally unique way, right? So unique to other names. While not as common as URLs, they will be used more as XML is adopted and used. So why do we use, or why do we need to use namespaces? So as people start reusing the standard data definition, data type definitions, and extending them, there will be a conflict in the XML parser as documents are exchanged if they have same names, right? So if you extend a DTD using an element or attribute name that's already in the DTD, the parser won't know which one you're using, right? So the DTD should, you should use different namespaces, and based on these namespaces, the DTD can easily identify which tag you're referring to, right? So we also have the same thing in HTML where we give IDs. For example, I can have the same formatting structure for a heading one throughout throughout my HTML code. So, but if I need to have a different formatting or different attribute for one of the headings, then I should use an ID which uniquely identifies that heading from the other headings, right? So namespaces will help us in XML just like that, right? So namespaces help standardize and uniquely brand elements and attributes. So namespaces employ uniform resource locators to instruct the user agent or the browser, XML parser, or XML application or others where to go to find the DTD against which the XML document is checked for validity. And at last, since the extensible style sheet language is written in XML syntax, it uses its own tags and elements and attributes, right? Not like CSS. So it creates a potential conflict with the data source tags. So XSL uses namespaces to distinguish elements that are instructions to the XSL processor from elements that specify literally this tree structure, right? So XSL uses a prefix XSL to identify these elements or tags or attributes belongs to the XSL file, right? So this will help the DTD file not to confuse elements or tags or attributes of the XML document and the XSL style sheet, right? So this is how you can identify or you can differentiate the XSL from. So you can have the same name, but the DTD will differentiate it because this has a prefix of XSL. Okay. So this is the end of our chapter 7. I hope you get some basics about XML. As I've said, this chapter is not to help you be programmers, but it's just to help you be curious. Help you to know what XML is actually, right? Because we have been talking about XML. EDI and standards are developed by XML, and you might wonder what XML is, right? So now, what is important to know here is XML is a markup language, and XML is used to develop standards, including ANSI and IDFACT standards, right? So, and how this XML documents are, what the design goals, how they look like, how they are different from HTML codes, right? So, this basics of HTML. So, this is like a prerequisite to maybe go further into learning the XML, right? So in our chapter 8 we will talk about IDFACT standards overview tutorial. So in this chapter you'll learn some basics information about IDFACT standards development and what are the messages. If you remember, we have talked about segments, data elements and envelopes. So in here I will show you some codes how this message, segments or envelopes look like. Messages, their structure, segments and types and loops. Segments, their structure, interpretations and conditions. Data elements, what they are and how to use them. Message structures and enveloping, packaging it all, and some functional acknowledgements, who needs them. So in our chapter 8 we'll talk about this contents. So this is all about our 7th chapter. Thank you for having me, and I hope to see you all in our next session in our chapter 8. Thank you for listening, and thank you.